America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might.
Good evening and welcome to Your Right to Know by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. My name is Mary Lotze and I will be your host for this evening's show. Joining me on the panel tonight are my good friends from not only Fitchburg but also from the Mass GOP. So let me start the introductions. Kathy Goguen, longtime, oftentimes frequent guest of Your Right to Know and member of the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. Then we have Thomas Frank Ardinger from Leominster and Susan Smiley from Lancaster, and both Frank and Susan are the Worcester-Middlesex GOP state representatives to the Mass GOP. Welcome, all of you, for being on our panel and joining us tonight on Your Right to Know. And tonight we're going to talk about some changes, some new things happening in Massachusetts, specifically in Boston, and that's to talk about our Governor Charlie Baker after a couple of months in office. We're going to talk about what's going on. What do you think? So we'll open up the discussion with that. So we all know some things. One of them is that Deval Patrick signed off on, and our legislature signed off in the last, before the election, on a $36 billion state budget. But we also know, that may sound good, but before the end of this fiscal year, which is June 30th, our new governor, Charlie Baker, has to close the gap on a $765 million budget gap. So even though we got a $36 million budget, this money, almost $1 billion, was not programmed into this budget. So we have got to find it somewhere. And I think this is a good beginning of now what? What is Charlie Baker, our new governor, Karen Polito, our new lieutenant governor, facing? And how are we going to begin addressing this? I think all of us can think of being responsible for our own home budgets. And if we were faced with a $765 deficit, we'd probably be sitting here now sweating some bullets, because these numbers you can't close up easily. So let's talk about it. And to just set the stage for our viewers, I want to put out a few things so we can then talk about it. Charlie Baker took office on January 8th. That was his inauguration. Within 24 hours, he sort of proclaimed a couple of things. He vowed not to raise taxes on the working people of Massachusetts or cut local aid to cities and towns. So he's not getting money that way. He instituted an across-the-board hiring freeze for all state workers, even contract hires to the state. The only exceptions will be public health and safety personnel. No raises for legislatures. I think that was a given actually before he took office. He assigned all cabinet secretaries. They are given 100 days, and we're coming up to the end of those 100 days, to perform department-wide, I could call them audits, but they call them performance assessments, to identify best practices within their departments, to look for efficiencies and budget reductions. It seems that it is very clear that Charlie Baker is demanding that the state government become responsive and efficient. Okay, so I'm going to open up the floor to you, my friends. What do you think about this action plan? Will it do it? How do you think?
I think it's too early to tell. He has obviously a big challenge ahead of him, and he even admits that. But the fact that he's taken such direct and decisive action from the day one indicates that he will probably get the job done. I think that's key.
I would agree. I think there's a lot to be seen. I like that he's approaching it from a business standpoint. He's truly looking at it as a good business manager would, and I think that's long overdue.
Yes.
I think he's making swift actions and smart actions. We saw one of the things that I particularly was impressed with was he had mentioned he was going to release the Chapter 90 funding for our municipalities who desperately need that money,
Right.
having worked in town government, recognize that, and he did it. He
Yeah.
did as he said, and he's got a sharp gal that he's appointed on his finance team, and I think together, they've worked together in the past. I think they're going to do great things, and as Frank mentioned, it is a little too early to tell, but again, my confidence in him and his team to get it done is far beyond anything I've had in a long while.
Sure, and confidence. I think we have confidence in his ability. Kathy, do you have any thoughts on it?
I think being a businessman, he just has to, or has to ask his department heads and his cabinet heads to look at their budgets. I mean, we all know when you've got a large state budget how easy it is to spend that extra money and ask for those extra funds that you may not really need. And I think he's just got to pare things down and make it lean and make it mean and just really make it efficient, so that, because this is our money. And so I think he's got to make the most of what we are willing to give him.
It's easy to just spend money. It's easy for
course
government.
it is.
Becomes very easy, and of course it's very popular, I think, for a governor to just keep taxing people, tax the rich.
I think we've seen it's been the philosophy
Right.
and the approach, and I think
Because you can make friends that way. You can promise people
absolutely.
things.
And I think the folks in the Commonwealth, as you mentioned, are ready to see some better use. And
Of course, we know that a lot of this huge budget was brought about by the negligence and the debacle of the health exchange. I mean, that was all part of it. So hopefully as we work and as he works to get new people in charge, or he has, and then close some of those problems with the healthcare exchange, that will also help, I think, close up the budget. But my concern is, one of the things we know is that government works so slowly. It's Byzantine, it's bureaucratic, there's so many levels to go through to work to get any problem resolved. And my biggest concern is, are we too big to even begin to work towards constructive changes, simply because government works so slowly? And I just want to cite another study that I had read on the DCF situation, and I think of all places, in Fitchburg, we become more concerned about DCF because of what we saw with our Jeremiah Oliver case. And again, that just being such a horrendous situation. But back last year, let's go back April of last year, Governor Deval Patrick said to Olga Roche, you have to resign. She did. She put in her resignation paper. She was the head of Department of Children and Family. She did resign, but she wasn't off the payroll till mid-October. So he had a new person in, but he still had Olga Roche in the position getting a full paycheck. Now, at that time, in response to the Jeremiah Oliver and all of the issues happening in DCF, there was a group that came in and did an audit, and they required a few things that would be required. They held DCF and the new head to a certain things. And as of now, nothing's been done. We have DCF social workers visited less than 87% of the children under the state watch. The goal and benchmark is 95%. They've been working on it almost a year. They still haven't reached that benchmark. Nearly 40% of DCF social workers are not licensed, which was required after the Jeremiah case and once they got the new leadership in Ms. Devaney. There's 119 children that are listed in the state as missing or on the run, yet none have been reported yet to the children's database. And then in the past year, 174 adults were added to the registry of alleged perpetrators, which is a secret list of 41,000 perpetrators. Law enforcement still can't access any of this. So my question is, here we have a case of 1 year where we had everybody said this was a major problem in Massachusetts government happening in a governmental agency where children and families are involved, and no, we have no corrective action. So this makes me wonder and have concerns about the ability of our state government to get out of our way at all.
I would think that you have to look at who he appointed to head up that department right now. Who is Linda Spears, who is the person that did the audit of the Department of Children.
Very interesting.
So getting someone like that in there who said this is what we have to do and do it, and to me indicates that Mr. Baker is going to make sure that this happens. And he's only been in office for less than what, 20
months,
days?
yeah,
Not even 20 days yet. He's got to have some time to make these changes. But if you look at the construction of his cabinet and the people that he has in there, and the Department of Children and Family is a prime example of how he has gone outside of the normal political operations and got the person in there that can do the job. So I think we'll see the changes.
And do you think now that as you look at his other positions that he's being put in, that they'll also be responsive like she is that when he picks people, when he picks his leadership teams?
He has done a fantastic job, I think, of, I don't know if Sue agrees with me or not, but he's done a fantastic job of picking a cabinet that is it's bipartisan. It has Democrats, it has unenrolled, it has Republicans, but if you look at the credentials of each person he's put in as a cabinet secretary, they are impeccable. I mean, these are the people that should be able to get the job done. And again, he's the type of person, based on his initial actions, that will hold these people accountable. If they aren't getting the job done, there won't be any brushing it under the rug and letting them just kind of slough off. He will demand that they do their jobs.
And I think again we can cite this confidence that's instilled, and probably a little bit more so maybe because we're a little bit more intimate with it, Frank and I.
Sure, you are. Thanks, Joe.
I think confidence really is the word, to know that, as Frank mentioned, his appointments, thoughtful, very thoughtful. He's taking people that are new. He's taking people as well that have been there. He's taking people that are qualified, and qualified being the key term. And I think it's not about patronage, it's about qualifications. And Mary Lotze is the Secretary of Health and Human Services, well respected in her industry. And I think people feel very confident about that. When I was out at the inauguration, the spirit of this bipartisanship, and I see Charlie as a can-do guy. We saw him be successful at Pilgrim Health. We've seen him be successful in the contributions through the GOP, et cetera. So, again, for me, it's all about confidence in my government.
Let me ask you another thing. You both touched on it, partnering with women. And I think this is kind of an interesting thing. Not only is he looking at Republicans who have certainly knowledge and professionalism in this required field, not just looking at political patronage, but he's going out of his way to identify and partner with other people across party lines. And the most specific person, a woman, a Democrat, Maura Healey. And I thought it was very interesting that he reached out to our new Attorney General, Maura Healey, as part of what he is calling one of his major issues, and that's the opiate addiction problem in Massachusetts. Do any of you feel like this is a good move, that he would partner with the other side, as we would like to say, the Democrats? Do you see this as a positive mood?
I think the difference between the Baker administration and previous administrations is he's not afraid. He's not afraid to reach out to people outside the party, because he wants the best people. And he's not looking for the patronage and whose turn is it, and he wants the best people regardless of where they come from. And I think we're going to see a big change because of that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, in Mary, as we think about these things, the governor and the attorney general, they represent all of the folks in the Commonwealth. And so, again, I see that as a positive bipartisan step forward. I like the fact that he has, in his key cabinets, he's got upwards of 40% representation by women in those key roles, and good women. I'm excited and feel confident about that, be it Republican or Democrat. So I think positively, again, again, he's a businessman. He knows what works and what doesn't, and we're going
I
to.
think another example of how he takes the right people and puts them in the right job is Stephanie Pollock, Secretary of Transportation.
Okay.
She was a big advocate for the automatic increase in the gas taxes. Governor Baker was against that. So he not only puts people in there that can do the job, but people that don't always agree with him.
Sure.
So he shows that willingness to work to get the job done for the Commonwealth.
Interesting that you say that, not people that actually disagree with him, because I can remember hearing once about President Obama, that he surrounds himself with people who think just like he does, so he's never challenged on any of his decisions. It's just everything is copacetic and goes with the flow. So now let's look at Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito, woman, smart woman from the central part of the state, Shrewsbury. What do you think? Will she be relegated to the back burner like oftentimes we see lieutenant governors? They just sort of, because they really don't have any true constitutional duties. You really don't need a lieutenant governor except to sit in when the governor is gone. What do you think? Is he going to utilize her in a very positive way, or is she going to be kind of one of those ghost lieutenant governors that we only hear about once in a while? What do you think?
Knowing Karen Polito, I don't think she would allow herself to be pushed into the shadows. I think she knows she has a role to play, and she's not going to be afraid. She's not going to be afraid to be seen and to work on issues that she thinks is important. And I don't think Charlie would have picked her if he was looking for, a shrinking violet to kind of sit there and do nothing. I think he wants a partner.
Yes, I would agree. I think Karen's just the kind of gal, the kind of people representation person that she's not going to wait to be told what to do. She's going to seize the day, and she's going to grab something that.
What do you think? Any ideas on what Peter? I thought Peter Lucas. He writes for the Sentinel, and I like his columns a lot. He thought she should be the one that's in charge of the opiate addiction issue, but I don't see that. I think by putting her, if he were to ever, Charlie Baker were to ever put Karen Polito in that role, it would diminish from Maura Healey's leading that up. So what do you think what do you think about that, or what do you think that Karen will take on?
For me, I think we heard on the campaign trail that she was going to work with the municipalities and the towns and the cities and really, and again, coming from that base, her experience knowing how to bring folks together. Both her and Charlie spoke of that. We want to hear from the towns and the cities what it is, how we can help you. And to me,
that be an interesting thought, that we have a lifeline.
Be like a liaison
between
other Beacon Hill and
a real life liaison.
Yes,
one that's actually going to get something done. Yes.
I mean, we've oftentimes talked in this show on many different panels, and I'm sure some of you have been involved in that discussion, that Boston ends at 495, and they don't even know we're out here, and.
I have a feeling that's changing as well.
That has changed.
I think it has changed. I think we've seen it. I don't know, Frank, we joke about it, but we've seen it, and Charlie's very sensitive to that. He spent a lot of time out here in Central Mass and farther out, and I think he's picking people from all over the Commonwealth and a lot of folks out this way. So again, I think that's, I bring the word confidence back. I think many of us should have that confidence to see that change that he is making.
He reached out to both Mayor Hawk and Mayor Mazzarella to be involved in his transition team, and I think you're going to see some representation from Central Mass, especially the cities, Fitchburg, Leominster, and Gardner, from this north central area, in the administration, because we've been neglected for forever. So I think it's time to change, and Karen will probably lead that effort.
Oh, that would be that I think would be an outstanding role for her.
Yes.
I was thinking, because I read this in one of the papers, energy is another issue that Charlie Baker is really focusing on, the very high cost of energy. We think of energy, oftentimes we think of our gas tanks, but this has nothing to do with the gas tanks. This has to do with our heating, our electricity,
it's much broader.
Our
water,
natural gas.
Yeah,
I mean, these are some of the things that he also mentioned that he really needs to get a handle on, because let's face it, When we look at companies and industry coming back, one of the things they look at is taxes and utilities as being instrumental in wanting to move back and give our people jobs. So that's also very important. What do you think his management style will be different than Deval Patrick? We kind of touched on it a little. Do you think it'll be a different management style than how Deval Patrick ran the state?
I think it couldn't help. They're two different men, two different philosophies. I think it can't help but be different. And again, I think people are ready for that, and that's why they elected him.
You're going to see a much more hands-on approach. I mean, you know, Deval was kind of remote, and you know, he was there, he was the governor, but you know, he wasn't really, didn't seem to be really involved with his department heads. Now, I don't think this has happened yet, but I think that Governor Baker made is making an effort to have regular meetings with all his cabinet heads to, you know, sit down in a room at the table, so to speak, and let the people, you know, tell him exactly what's going on, so he understands what needs to be done.
Yeah, and by not having regular meetings, that's how things get out of control.
Sure.
And I think...
And having people not tell you the truth.
Exactly.
Because they're...
But if you're not meeting with them, how do you know what's going on? So I think with the hands-on approach that we're going to have now, he's going to have a much better idea of what the problems are so you can solve them before they get out of control.
An interesting statistic that I read, again, this, in the paper, this was from the Boston Herald editorial section, and this was talking about, again, the budget, and which is really the number one. Budget is really the number one issue in the state right now. And one of the numbers that I read, and it has to do with the legislature, Massachusetts had a 7.3% increase in spending, government spending, 7.3% increase, but only a 4.5% increase in the revenue. So what that tells you is we have well overspent. Do we have enough money in that budget? Is there enough money? Do we fund our state government enough? Should we have a $43 billion budget in the state? What is that a right number?
That's not, I don't think it can be answered at this point. What we have to do is wait to see what comes out of this 100-day study that the cabinet heads are supposed to, you know, provide to Governor Baker. At that point, you know, he can determine how much of excess there is in the state government and maybe pare it back. You know, we can't continue this routine of saying, well, gee, we need more money because our spending is higher. You know, it's like a kid in a candy store. If you give him $1, he's going to spend $1.10 if you let him.
Sure.
Okay, or she. But the problem is we have to realize if you have $1 to spend, then that's what you have to do. If there's some critical area that has to deal with you know, public safety or something like that, that has to have an increase in the budget, then we have to do it. But it has to be done in a logical, business-like manner. And I think Governor Baker will do that.
Again, one of the fears I have is we identified then that we have a spending problem and not a revenue problem. But the people, you know, Governor Deval Patrick didn't get to this spending problem on his own. This was certified and validated by our state house and our state representatives who went along with every spending increase and every opportunity to raise the amount of money spent. And yet we all know, I just, you know, had to look because I don't know, total state senators are 40, 34 of are Democrats and 6 are Republicans, and in the state house we have 160 state representatives. It's approximately 125, 126 which are Democrats, and like 34, 35 that are Republicans. So based on that, will Charlie Baker be able to make some of these differences, or will the legislature that just allowed the budget to get out of control under Governor Deval Patrick still allow the government to get out of control under Charlie Baker, or will they help correct some of these problems?
Well, I feel truly optimistic that you're going to find in our legislators and our senatorial representation that people are going to become logical. People aren't going to vote the party line. I think Charlie is going to bridge this gap, and I think you're going to see some logical, positive realistic, common sense approaches, and different than what we've seen in the last 8 years. Now, I may be naive in that regard, but I do know a number of folks that aren't in our party that have interest to be fiscally conservative. And so I think if you get the right leader and a good collaborative working relationship as staff meetings and whatnot, that you're going to get a lot more done. And I feel positive you touched upon that, and I think you'll see it. I hope to see it. Yeah. I feel hopeful, where before I hadn't.
Yeah, if you just listen to the message that Senate President Rosenberg and Speaker DeLeo have been putting out in the news media about being physically conservative, it could be just fluff at this point, but the fact that they're talking that line indicates that there's been a big change. There's a new sheriff in town, and I think they're going to help make sure that the government is run more physically responsible.
We're almost, I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, they're going to get away with what they can get away with. And obviously before they could get away with it. And now they can't, so I think they're going to be forced to rein themselves in and look at everything.
And be held accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Not only to their own selves, but their constituents.
I know you're not going to believe this, but our 30 minutes is just coming to a close. But before we stop, I want one answer. We're wrapping up, or we're starting now for 2016. Who's your choice for president? Who do you think it'll be? Not your personal choice, but who do you think will get the nod for Democrat and Republican? Any guesses?
The gentleman I'd like to see is bowed out, Mr. Paul Ryan. So that was a little disappointing.
Democrat Hillary? Or
if that's
Elizabeth?
Probably
so.
Hillary will be, coronated.
Who is your Republican?
I don't have one. I know Scott Walker is getting a big following. He's a strong person. He's taken on the Democrats in Wisconsin. I don't know whether or not he'll get any steam or not.
Frank?
I have absolutely no idea, to be honest with you.
Playing it safe.
I think it'll be an interesting couple years.
Well, we'll have many times to talk about it.
And we'll be working hard, all of us.
And I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We thank you for watching Your Right to Know and sitting in with the FRCC. As we leave you, we want you to remember that your local city or town Republican committee is the only grassroots organization that holds dear your liberty and your constitutional rights and values. We encourage you to join us at any of our meetings. And why? Because the GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity, and because we always stand for freedom. Thank you and good night.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power